AI has made a massive amount of impact. However, we haven't used AI in mainstream retail for resale itself. So going forward within extended producer responsibility, data will become king, because data is how the fashion brand retailer will report on what it's done with a garment, how many they received, where they went, how many they sold, how many came back, how many were disposed of. Data will be king.
It's the eCommerce Master Plan podcast, here to help you solve your marketing problems and grow your e-commerce business. Cutting through the hype to bring you inspiration and advice from the e-commerce sector and beyond. Here's your host, Chloe Thomas.
Hello and welcome. It's great to have you here. Thank you for hitting play and choosing to listen to one of our inspiring guests. In this episode, we've got a past guest back on for something a little different. Last time Andy was on the show was an epic 3 years ago, and he was here telling us about how they do online retail at charity organisation Oxfam, which was fascinating. This time he's back to get deep into the world of Preloved, and all the ins and outs of it is one of our What Would You Do episode guests. Our What Would You Do with Andy it's a big one, and we really are going to be talking all around it. We are doing What Would You Do if you were a head of e-commerce at a fashion brand wanting to play in the second-hand or pre-loved space. We're going to cover all the things you need to think about as we get into this, and maybe come to some conclusions, maybe not. But it's absolutely fascinating to hear from someone who is so deep in the world of pre-loved and the charity sector, and how all of that links through to what we do in mainstream, I suppose, fashion retail. So fascinating stuff coming up. Make sure you listen right to the end, because Andy's got some brilliant top tips, including some amazing stats around live stream shopping, of all things.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
And now to introduce our special guest. Andy Ostcliffe is the chief at Chiefly, where they're experts on the charity retail sector and pre-loved sales across product categories. Previously, Andy co-created and led two of the world's largest charity online retailers, Oxfam and British Heart Foundation. Hello, Andy.
Hey, Chloe, what an introduction. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, it's all you, sir. It's all you. Lovely to have you back on the show. How have things been since we last caught up? It's been a few years now.
It has been a few years. I was just saying I've read your book a few times on flights going backwards and forwards across the globe. It's been particularly busy, but very, very interesting.
I mean, it's a fascinating time to be in. These days, I'm not sure whether we call it secondhand or circular or what the right terminology is anymore, but to be in that used fashion space is fascinating.
I mean, it's pre-loved. Come on, it's not secondhand. You know,
Sorry.
It's pre-loved fashion, and wow! If you look at some of the stats in terms of number of users on certain platforms, of which I'm sure we'll get into, what people are buying and their price points, then I think it's an exciting time as a consumer. It could be quite a challenging time as a mainstream retailer.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We've kind of like got the tech evolving, we've got the consumer behaviours evolving, and we've got completely different business models coming into play as well. And I think for anyone who's running a fashion brand in particular, because that's kind of at the bleeding edge of it, is fashion at the minute. Anyone running a fashion brand at the moment, working out how to play in this space for whatever reason they want to play in this space, because that's a whole other list of questions as well. It's really difficult to work out what to do. So you've suggested we do, what would you do if you were head of e-commerce at a fashion brand wanting to play in the secondhand space? So Andy, what would you do if you were a head of e-commerce at a fashion brand wanting to play in the secondhand, and I should say pre-loved space right now?
Wow, what a great question. And again, mainstream retailers are literally scratching their heads, because let's break up what a fashion retailer looks like. You've got the value element of the sector, which could be supermarket fashion. It could be low entry, such as Primark, who are playing in that particular space, but very much from a bricks and mortar perspective. But watch that space, because their main shareholder has a few months ago decided to sell off parts of their business. Primark will be separated from that main parent company. Who knows? You may get some new shareholders coming along saying, why are we not online? So that may change that view a little. But if you were to look at the marketplace now and say, who is really serious about pre-loved fashion, I'd have to say it's Marks and Spencer's. And it's Marks and Spencer's. It's a third-party resale platform, and it's eBay. And they're really giving it a good go. I mean, who knew? This is the retail chain where my mum goes for underwear, now experimenting with pre-loved fashion online.
And I find it so interesting that M&S they haven't gone for the doing it on our website. You know, they're not doing the buyback, we recondition, we control it on our own platform. They're doing we buy it back and then we sell it on eBay in the M&S eBay shop, which is such a surprise. I thought they'd have wanted the brand control. I didn't think they'd have wanted it on a third-party platform. I find that strategically intriguing.
It's not easy. It's difficult. So if you look at, let's look at some mainstream retail brands in fashion, and let's take one of the supermarket fashion brands. And the way that their logistics, their entire infrastructure, their entire operation works through 3PL. So with Sainsbury's as a really good example, DHL are one of their biggest 3PL providers. It's difficult enough dealing with brand new product, the logistics of it arriving just in time, the distribution into the store network, all the reverse logistics that take place in terms of product that just didn't sell in the store versus returns. Sometimes product just doesn't even arrive at the supermarket chain, the physical stores, because it just didn't arrive in time. So if you thought new goods were challenging in terms of the logistics models and the just-in-times that have to fall into place for that to happen, Preloved is just another ball game. Different sizes, different styles, different seasons. And have you got enough of the same product? Because sometimes you may just have a handful of pair of 501s, and yet you're going to broadcast out to millions of shoppers that your 501s are at X price, come and get them. So I think it does have some real challenges, and maybe Marks and Spencer's decided that by offloading that to a third party, they can trial, they can test, they can see, but ultimately if it went wrong, well, it's not really our problem. That's the third party supplier who's dealing with that part of our business.
I think you make such a good point there in terms of even if you want to do it yourself internally, you know, you're a smaller brand who it fits with what you do and who you are and everything. It is a completely different business model. Everything is different, from product photography to ironing and mending things potentially to having, you used to have for the blue blue jeans, you had 5 sizes and depth of identical product units on each of those 5 sizes. Now you have 5 sizes plus 3 conditions with potentially individual photography, potentially individual descriptions. You've then got items of one, logistically, marketing is different, website, how that behaves and how that functions is different. So I think whether you're going to do the outsourced third-party option for where you sell it, who manages it, or whether you're going to do it within your existing warehouse space and within your existing team, it's as complicated as suddenly opening up a retail shop, I think, in terms of how you manage it as a business and the different techniques. It's not just going to fit into your existing systems.
I agree. And so if we thought the logistics were challenging enough, let's just look at the economics, because when you throw economics at this, which is quite clearly where PLC retailers are now heavily focusing, what's the return? If we invest, what do our shareholders expect? And some of those shareholders are now huge organizations. So their expectation on bang for buck, more than ever before. So the economics and let's just dive into economics, because we all know Vinted in terms of the platform and its success has been phenomenal. So we saw Vinted created in Europe. It comes to the UK. It collects in the UK 17.2 million users. That's almost a third of the population operating on a platform that buys and sells pre-loved fashion. So then it expands into the States. eBay get quite worried. Buy Depop, which has been a traditional fashion platform, and suddenly then out of nowhere, in a very, very sneaky, low-key PR piece, Vinted say, but we're now operating in Australia. So when you look at the economics, and let's just take a pair of jeans that you would buy from mainstream retail for £100, and you can buy them on Vinted for £10, where on earth would mainstream retail try and get involved with the price dynamics of how that works? All that organisation, all that extra work, all that ranging, merchandising, and you're going to sell it for a tenth of what it is in the store. Maybe it just doesn't fit inside mainstream retail. And maybe that's why we're not seeing mainstream retail at the moment entering the pre-loved marketplace. Now, just one more point, because fashion retailers for quite some time have been very active around, well, let's just concentrate on the sourcing. Let's make sure that some of the content of the product that we're manufacturing has recycled material within it. And let's show some of our credentials and maybe pick up some of our audience around feeling better, not feeling good, but feeling better about buying new clothing that has got recycled material within it. But you do come to a point that there's only so much recycled material. This is where we get geeky. There's only so much recycled material you can actually put in a new piece of clothing where it will keep its shape, its texture, its form, its colour. So we're quite restricted, really. And therefore, I think we've got an audience. We quite clearly in the UK have picked up a shopper who wants value for money. They want to shop on their terms. It's almost become a social activity. And don't get me started on live. If we pick this up later on in the interview, it's now entertainment as well as shopping. 2 for 1.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, completely. But I think the economics, yes, the economics you outlined is clearly the core economics part of this. But then I think we have 2 other things coming into play. One of which is the data. And I think it was Boston University did the research where customers who are buying secondhand and selling back secondhand to the brand have a better lifetime value than those who only buy full price products. So we've got a trackable impact on customer lifetime value that's positive. And then we've also got the increasing pressure and legislation on brands to deal with their end of life, in inverted commas, end of first use products, be that returns, be that dead stock, be that customer used product, and how they deal with that. So for me, it's not purely just about, ooh, there's loads of our product on Vinted and eBay, I want a slice of that, which I get, but as you just outlined, the economic, it's not big margins we're talking about here. But then there's also the things we've got to build anyway, so let's leverage more product through that process, if that makes sense. And then the legislative cost that's going to be coming in our direction sooner or later.
Yeah. Let's look at legislation, because legislation is active in Europe, and I've spent some time across the Netherlands to understand, and the Netherlands in terms of extended producer responsibility. And of course, then you've got digital product passport, which follows that first piece of legislation, to give more responsibility, clearly extended producer responsibility, give more responsibility to the clothing brands as to what happens to that garment after it's finished, after another life, really. Now, the Netherlands is quite strict in terms of the legislation, and each state within Europe has decided its own rules. So from country to country, you can find yourself in maybe 50% only needs to be recycled. The Netherlands were getting up to 75% needs to be recycled. And this is where retailers are really starting to, they're looking at this from an opportunity. The opportunity is for you to bring back your clothing back into store, and the brand issues you with a credit. So it might be 10% off or 15% off. And therefore, they're encouraging reuse. You come into store, you hand over your bag, and it doesn't have to be like for like. It could be 5 T-shirts and 2 pairs of jeans, and you're shopping for a new jacket, for example, and you get a monetary value off your next shop. Now, sneakily, that does work. But it also entices us to buy another item, but you could argue we're recycling that item also. Now, we'll talk about where those items go and in what volume, because that is becoming very interesting. But we have put in place a commercial piece of mechanism that makes the shopper psychologically feel better, because they've brought in their old clothing, they're buying something new. Hey, I win on both ends, really. So that's starting to have a real impact. And where this would really start to show up in the UK is once we get to that point of having extended producer responsibility, and it is coming. DEFRA have put this off for quite some time, but with mainstream Europe now deploying this, Australia too, across in the States, in various US states are now bringing out extended producer responsibility. The UK is not going to be too far apart. There is a warning that comes with this. Out of any other country, the saturation or the population that we have in terms of charity shops is huge. Let's think about this. Some estimates say we've got up to 10,000 charity shops on the high street. And the way that a charity shop exists is essentially, we all know this, you bring items of clothing into the charity shop, you make a donation, or it could be the donation bank that's in the car park of your chosen supermarket shop that you go to on a weekend. We deposit a bag of our things. We've had a wardrobe clear out, and the charity shop goes through those items. They decide what can be resold, and they put them either online or sell them through their store. If suddenly the big brand retailers now start offering an incentive, a financial incentive for you to walk into store with those items rather than taking them to the charity shop, who sometimes, and they are getting much better at this, decide what they want and what they don't want. No, we don't want those items, but we will have those. Thank you very much. If you turn that on its head, where the supermarket accepts anything, or the mainstream fashion retailer accepts anything, and you get a monetary coupon, then suddenly where did all the Preloved clothing go? Because it's not going to the charity shop, it's going back into mainstream retailers. And that is a danger, that is a warning for mainstream UK charity retail to watch out and maybe come up with some alternative marketing concepts to keep level with what mainstream retail could start doing over here in the UK.
Interesting. I didn't think you were going to go there. I thought you were going to talk about charity shops having too much stock, because I think there's an element of, from a consumer standpoint, well, I think consumers are going to have to start taking, or should start taking, more responsibility for the end of life of their products, where I think there's, you can feel good by selling it, in inverted commas, back to the retailer for a £5 off or a 10% off. And then you can feel good by donating it to the charity. But in both instances, some of that product is going to end up being recycled or passed on or flown around the world and dumped on somebody else, because if in this little river of clothes running down the place, we're still manufacturing too much, more than the world needs, not just more than the UK needs, which I think comes into your fascinating trip to Ghana with all of this. But we have this kind of tidal wave of product which we're just dumping on the third world, which is probably the wrong terminology to use, but we're dumping on other countries to deal with rather than dealing with it ourselves. Annie's smirking at me here, so I'm going to stop digging the hole and let the expert talk.
Thanks, Chloe. I find the analogy really interesting. And let's start this journey of where clothing goes. And let's start with the charity shop, and we'll break this down, and we'll look at where mainstream retail falls into this, and we'll try and pull in some online and some e-commerce as we go to keep your audience interested, because they're probably thinking at this moment in time, this guy sounds like Jeff Banks, but let's give this a go. Okay, if you look at what we are doing with our closet, when we sort our closet at the moment, with 17.2 million users on Vinted, we are creating essentially two bags. We're creating a bag that we're prepared to take to the charity shop, and we're creating another bag that potentially has more value in it. And 17.2 million of us are deciding that we're going to have a go at this, and we're going to sell it on Vinted, and we're going to realise some value out of what our wardrobe has produced. That creates a problem for charity, because charity, once you've worn a supermarket brand T-shirt for more than half a dozen or a dozen times, and there are various claims from various brands of how long their product lasts, it's still a supermarket brand T-shirt. I mean, what do you think it's worth? And if you go back a couple of years, charity shops would relish the Ben Sherman polo T-shirt, the Boss T-shirt, etc., etc. The big, the designer brand style product would sit proudly inside that shop. But they're running out of that product, and the reason why is that suddenly we found that it's got a value, and we're deciding to cash in that value ourselves. So a lot, not all of it, a lot of product which is finding its way into UK charity is lower economic value product. And what do you do with it? Well, there are two really big recycling plants in Europe currently working under full economic mechanisms. That's the best way I can try and describe it. They're not tests. It's not a proof of concept. It's not we've got part of the machine, but we're just waiting for the other part to arrive. They're full-blown operational sites. There's one in Turkey and there's one in Sweden. And if you're looking for true fibre to fibre, that's the direction of where that product currently transits. Now, if you then go back to the charity shop will have a collection from what we call a rag merchant. A rag merchant is just that. It's someone who comes round and offers a price per kilo for the excess product that you've generated from that particular location. And let's lump together a number of shops. So you're a national charity retailer, you've got 200 shops or more. not few of those around, not many of those around at the moment, but you've got 200 charity shops or more. You've got a national agreement. That rag is collected. Some of it is sorted in the UK, and then it's created into product types and product mixes. Now, Ghana. Why Ghana? Ghana is by far the largest marketplace in the world for pre-loved fashion. And you get a lot of questions as to, well, why? Well, you've got 30,000 market traders who operate in the Kantamanto marketplace in Accra, the capital of Ghana. And having spent some time inside that marketplace, absolutely fascinating. If you get an opportunity to go, you get a visa clearance and passport control, actually let you in the country, then go and have a look because it is a fascinating place. Some 1.2 million people are reliant upon that marketplace to earn a living, or whether it's provide education or healthcare, economics for their own family. It's a really important piece of infrastructure, so much so the Ghanaian government recognise that this is an integral part of their economy, so don't take it away. And there are lots and lots of statistics where some organisations will tell you that 40% of what arrives in Ghana is just waste. And that's why it all gets kicked out and it gets washed downstream and it turns up on a beach. And those are the pictures and the photographs that the journalists love to see and love to send to us. And the reason for that is it creates headlines. Headlines create traffic. Traffic creates a monetary connection for their newspaper or their article or for the journalist. So, but be very aware of that 40% waste. If you were to look at that rag collector in the UK, if everything they did was 40% waste, they just wouldn't be in business. If the wholesaler on the marketplace who bought that parcel and everything in that bale of clothing was 40% waste, they wouldn't be in business either. Neither would be the market trader. So I really, really do question those statistics. But essentially, the bales arrive 57,000 tons a year arrive in Ghana just from the UK. We are the biggest exporter of pre-loved clothing to that particular location. More than China, more than America, more than the whole of Europe. We are the largest. And of course, we therefore have created some really interesting relationships, some very close working relationships between the mainstream rag merchants who are based here in the UK and the wholesale traders who are based in Accra. And some of these relationships are 30 and 40 years old. So they have traded on the product sets that we send and they ask for. And what's really interesting, Chloe, is that those wholesale traders come to the UK. They come to the sorting locations in the UK. They advise what product they're looking for. They will say, we don't want white T-shirts because white T-shirts over here just don't sell, or we don't want this colour, or we don't want this style, or don't. And you start to think, common sense, you'd never send puffer jackets or winter wear into an African nation because it just doesn't work. So they're quite specific on what they want, the quantity, the style. And when you talk to people in the marketplace, as I did, and you ask the question, what is it? What is it that your customers are looking for? What are they buying? What kind of styles? You quite simply get told exactly what you're wearing. My customer wants what you're wearing. They want the latest styles. They want the latest fashion. And therefore, with that rag merchant, you've actually got a very quick turnaround of where that product is sorted in the UK and is sent to Africa. So fashion in terms of trend, in terms of what people are wearing, has caught up quite quickly across the African nations. It's an absolutely fascinating location. Let me just add one more point because I can see you're dying to ask me another question. How does that product get to Accra? And I was there just a few weeks ago and I had a bit of a rummage and I started looking through items for sale. And those items for sale, you can find everyday the swing tags and labels that you would find on fashion in the high street in Wolverhampton is on sale in Accra in Cantonmento. The full brand name, the full price tag. Even the charity shops have left their price tags on the items. And I came back with some photographs and I sat down with a charity. I said, you've got items here that are priced at £15 and priced at £12. And they're on sale in Cantonmento in Accra. Would it simply not have been better to sell that at £6 or £4, discount it before you have to dispose of that product, before it was sold to the rag merchant? And the response is, and this is where I think e-commerce has a real big part still to play in the sector. The response was, Andy, if we suddenly marked everything down by 50% in the shop, we would devalue the offer of what we are selling within our shop. Everyone would suddenly think, well, I'm not going to pay £20 for that item. I'm going to pay £10 because I know you're going to mark it down. So it's a way of the organisation being able to merchandise and move stock along. If it's not sold in 2 weeks, then it's not going to sell. You either rotate it around a neighbouring charity shop, if you have one within your organisation, or you simply sell it to the rag merchant. But the irony is that the rag merchant will offer between 1 pence, 5 pence, if you're really lucky, 10 pence per kilo, and then they'll do a sortation and it'll go to Accra. So we are allowing ourselves as a retailer to be defined by what we think our shopper will want and what price they're prepared to pay. And we're merchandising, we're exiting stock on a fear rather than saying, okay, well, it's been on sale in the shop for 2 weeks. I'll move it onto Vinted, I'll move it onto eBay, I'll move it onto Whatnot, I'll move it onto Depop, whichever platform takes your fancy. It's got to be worth £2 or £3 on there before we start sending it into the other side of the world to sell for a few pounds, really, or a few pence.
Yeah, so kind of a more traditional retail merchandising strategy needed in the charity shops to squeeze the money out of these items. Going back to our original what would you do question, because we've covered some fascinating things that a head of e-commerce needs to think about before they decide what the Preloved play at their fashion brand is. From everything we've talked about, it strikes me that the best option for a brand, and maybe for everybody, would be if the brand offers a buyback scheme of some sort. And then rather than having a secondhand section on the website, they have an agreement with another charity chain, which then means the charity chain get that premium clothing that they're losing to buyback schemes and Vinted. And the retailer has none of the headache and all of the PR juice and they've done the responsible thing and all the rest of it. Am I oversimplifying, or is that a pretty good route to go for?
It's not a bad route to go for. And the reason why we get stuck on the schematics of why would be it's something that we've not done before. Okay, let's break this down. AI. I mean, let's bring AI into this argument, because this is where the game changes completely. If I go back to my days at British Heart Foundation would be presented with a range of items. And whether you were working on stamps and coins, vinyl, clothing, there was a given that as a lister working inside that organisation, you would list so many items per lister per day. Those were the fundamentals, almost the foundations of how the organisation worked and what your future investment might look like in terms of creating a much larger e-commerce department. Okay, let's bring in AI now. Remember, 40 listings per lister per day. AI in some commercial clothing resale operations can do now up to 220 garments per lister per day. So if AI is able to give us a huge process and economic uplift. Could AI play more of a part within mainstream retail, fashion retail, that maybe it hasn't appeared within before? We know AI, for example, can measure garments. We know, for example, you can stand in front of a camera and you can try on virtually different ranges of shirts and colours and styles. And we've been using AI to try and reduce the number of returns through I'll buy 3 and I'll keep the pair that fits. So AI in that introduction has made a massive amount of impact. However, we haven't used AI in mainstream retail for resale itself. So going forward within extended producer responsibility, data will become king, because data is how the fashion brand retailer will report on what it's done with a garment, how many they received, where they went, how many they sold, how many came back, how many were disposed of. Data will be king. So the charity retailer, or maybe even a commercial retailer that can match the requirement for data, will be the winner, because the data that will be required will fundamentally form part of the compliance that will be required for extended producer responsibility, and maybe in some respect digital product passport as well.
E-commerce Master Plan is supported by some of the greatest companies in the e-commerce sector. Here's a reminder of who they are.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
It's time for the top tips round.
Okay, I love this section because it gives me and our listeners some really quick ideas for taking our businesses to the next level. Andy, are you ready for the top tips?
Let's go.
Okay, the book top tip. If everyone listening to this podcast agreed to take Friday off and read a book to make their business better, which book would you recommend?
You know what? I would take a break from business on a Friday and I'd read something completely unbusiness related, because giving your head that space rather than thinking about work, especially on a Friday. So I think we're missing, if you've seen any of my videos, I try and put some wit and some humour into what I'm talking about. So pick up something that makes you laugh, pick up something that makes you think. Don't pick up something that tells you how to share trade or deal or, increase your productivity by another 10 or 15%. Save that for the day job. Get a life.
I have to say, I do now always have a fiction paperback book in the office. When I need a little time out, I'll go and sit somewhere else and read that for 10 minutes. So yeah, I wholeheartedly approve of that as a piece of advice there. Traffic top tip. Which marketing method do you either prize above all others or think doesn't get the press it deserves?
Live shopping has been around, Chloe, as you and I will know, for quite some time. Live shopping TV. I mean, the most famous one is quite clearly QVC, and now you've got multiple channels of QVC. You can buy a lawnmower on channel 1, you can buy cosmetics on channel 2. So live shopping has, without doubt, taken off. And where I've been astonished on some of the results that live shopping has produced. And it's not in areas you would have normally associated with this. So some of the smaller kind of boutique organisations have gone out on a bit of a whim and a prayer and thought, right, we're going to put someone in front of the camera. We're going to do it at a completely unsociable time for them, because 7 o'clock on a night time is not generally when we're all at work, but it's when we're all watching either something on our phones, scrolling, or watching some TV. And they've decided to go at it. And let me give you one really good example, because I was at the Charity Retail Association National Conference in Wales a few days ago. And Barnardo's, the children's charity, gave a talk about how they've been experimenting with live shopping. And they did that awkward, let's just jump in and try it. They now do 3 live sessions per week. It has been so successful, they're now going to do 1 per day. And moving further forward from that, they're going to do 5 each day. And let me tell you why, because this is fascinating. In their product mix of what they receive, if you're kind of a charity retailer, what you try and do is you try and save the best stuff for online. We've got a psychological threshold that when we walk into a charity shop, if something's more than £25, we kind of go, how much? Which is an old Yorkshire war cry. And that's because we assume that you're a charity, you shouldn't be charging more than £25 for something. And of course, there are caveats. So, everyone writing in the comments say, oh, I sold something for £100. You probably did, but I'm talking in generalistic terms. So if you expose it online, you can realize more value for it. And sometimes the person who's bidding for that item online doesn't realize it's coming from a charity. So sometimes it can really increase in terms of value. However, let's take Pokemon cards, which was the example that was given. Barnardo's would have sold a pack of Pokemon cards. They would have collected up from the last couple of weeks all the Pokemon cards that have been brought into the shops. They'd weigh them, they'd try and count them up, they'd give some averages, and they'd say, here's a bundle of Pokemon cards, start the bidding. And they may reach £25, £35. And the irony of this is that it was one of their biggest returning items as well. But not all the cards returned. Quite clearly, some consumers were keeping the best ones and sending some back. Now, let's bring out live shopping. Let's ask the team within Barnardo's, does anyone know anything about Pokemon cards? And the most introvert, technical individual at the back room puts their hand up and says, I do. And that person suddenly is presenting under their own steam. That's their desire. They know about this product. They are inherently interested in this product. And now they're starting to realize real, true value, because when that collector card comes along, it's given the airspace, the time, and it reaches the value as to what that product is worth. And live complements e-com. E-com complements bricks and mortar. And if we go back to, my days at John Lewis, when omni-channel was all the rage, that terminology, omni-channel, nobody uses that anymore. But you've essentially got a number of platforms or a number of vehicles or a number of mechanisms where you reach your customer. Bricks and mortar, e-com, and live. So I think, long-winded answer, I could have just said live shopping, Chloe, but that's the reason why live shopping is really starting to gain some traction.
Love the detail on that, Andy. We'll let you have the super long answer. The next one then is the tool top tip. Maybe a collaboration tool, a social media plugin, a phone app, or just a way of working. Is there a cool little tool you use that makes you and your team more efficient from day to day?
Phone app. It's going to be phone app on the product sets that I'm working on, or I've got dare I say this, it's going to be AI and looking at some information and some details that AI throws back, because that level of information now really starts to make a difference in that project or that work that you're delivering.
Nice. Okay, the carbon top tip. What's your favourite way to reduce the carbon footprint of an e-commerce store?
Use the packaging that the item has been sent out in to do something else with. It's dead easy. Now, I'm not saying return the item, but I'm saying if that item has another life. And a top tip, and I've seen this in action, post back. So even if you're wanting customers to send product back, as we talked before, in terms of a take back scheme, if they can use the original packaging that the product came within and they can send that back, then hey, that's another reuse of that packaging.
Nice, like that. Andy, before we say goodbye, could you please let the listeners know where they can get in contact with you if they want to chat more about all of this or anything else, really?
Absolutely. I'm dead easy to find. And many people do connect with me over LinkedIn, which is my business networking channel. You can drop me a DM on there. I do answer everyone. So please find me on there. And recently you can find me on TikTok, YouTube, X, and other mainstream channels.
Love it. Just search for Andy Ostcliffe to get involved with all of that. And I know Andy's, as you can all tell, Andy's knows so much about all of this. So do send him your questions and push us all further along on the journey. Andy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again. It's always a pleasure catching up with you.
Fantastic and great to see you again. Let's not leave it so long next time.
Fascinating to hear from Andy there on all the challenges in the pre-loved space at the moment. So much opportunity, but making the right decisions about how you handle it, which levers you use, how you process it, how you support others in the space as well. I think lots, not necessarily huge answers there, but plenty for us all to talk about. You can get your hands on our notes from the episode, including those top tips and links to what we mentioned, by heading over to ecommercemasterplan.com. You could also use our direct episode short links. Just put ecmp.info/the number of this episode into the URL bar and you'll be redirected straight to the right episode page. And when you get to the website, please join the Chloe Thomas email list, because I'd love to keep updating you with all the cool stuff we've got going on and other people have going on to help you build your business. If you like this episode, then make sure you check out episode 454, which is Andy on the show again, this time going in deep into what he was up to when he was working at Oxfam. So that really builds on what we've been talking about today. You can also find all our fashion episodes at ecmp.info/fashion, or all our other What Would You Do's via ecmp.info/WWYD. Thank you for tuning into this and every episode of the e-commerce master plan podcast. I bring you a new interview every week because I want to inspire and help e-commerce business owners like you to succeed and thrive with your businesses, including encouraging all those consumers and businesses to make more sustainable buying decisions. So if you know someone this show can help, please tell them to listen to the e-commerce master plan podcast. I hope you have a great week and don't forget to keep optimizing.
Thank you for listening to the e-commerce master plan podcast. Find out more at ecommercemasterplan.com/podcast.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.